Okay, let's move on to two other cases. Tiffany, maybe you can help us out with that. Just to give you a summation of that, remember this deals with what Jeff was talking about is gender affirming care, but it does raise the question, well, what about sex and neutral bathrooms, access to bathrooms? What about transgender sports in schools, in public schools? That's actually coming up next year. So you can look at this as an initial precedent on how the court feels about transgender care, because there are other things, and also they ruled in favor of denying transgender people serving in the military under the emergency order. So we're getting an inkling of where this is going. Two cases that dealt with schools, Tiffany. One is out of Oklahoma, which oddly was 4-4 because Justice Barrett recused herself, just like one of you said something about Justice Jackson recusing himself. During that year, it was also 4-4. This is a case that deals with public charter schools, one in particular in Oklahoma, that wanted to be a public charter school that taught religion, Christianity. And of course, that violates the spirit of the separation between church and state, technically violates the First Amendment because of that split. The state is not supposed to be funding religious education. Public charter schools are charter schools, they're public schools. And the Supreme Court the Supreme Court of Oklahoma rejected the attempt to fund those schools with public money because it would be religious. I don't know whether you think that if Justice Barrett had been there, she would have ruled in favor of the school to say, now I guess there's one quick precedent, which is the court recently, and if you've been here before, there was a court case recently that said if the state is funding private schools, it can't deprive religious private schools. So that's like a hook to hang this on, right? If you're going to give it to one, give it to the other. Years ago, we talked about if you're going to pave the playgrounds of schools, of elementary schools around the state, you can't not pave the ones, even with public funds. So how do we understand this case, given the fact that it was 4-4?
I mean, I think I'm not sure how to understand it, to be completely honest with you. From what I could tell, what Chief Justice Roberts was suggesting in oral argument was he was sympathetic to the decision from the Oklahoma Supreme Court. And so perhaps that's why it split 4-4. He may have voted with the liberals. But honestly, I think that it's going to come back. It's not going to be another lawyer from Notre Dame who would put Barrett in the position of needing to recuse herself. And I really don't know how she's going to come out. I mean, religious organizations, religious practitioners do very well before this court. They simply do.
On religious liberty grounds.
On religious liberty grounds. But this is such a blatant thing. I mean, the case that you brought up, it was a case from Maine from a couple of years ago, where Maine is a very rural state, as you all likely know. And so it can be difficult for kids to get a public school education. And so as a consequence, the state was funding the ability of parents to send their kids to private schools as long as they were non-sectarian. And the court has developed this jurisprudence in religious freedom cases over the course of the past couple of years, a very robust jurisprudence of neutrality. You have to treat religion and non-religion the same. And so that's why the court in that decision said that you cannot exclude the sectarian schools from receiving these funds as well, because that discriminates against them. I think the distinction between that case and the Oklahoma charter school cases, there's no discrimination here. There's just a decision to fund religious education if they can get away with it. And so I am hopeful that when the issue eventually comes back to the Supreme Court, that we will get at least a 5-4 decision saying no. The court has very much allowed the free exercise clause to overtake the establishment clause over the course of the past couple of years, and I am hopeful that that will not continue.
Just a quick reminder, right? The freedom of religion has two pieces to it in the First Amendment. The first is the right to practice your religion, but it also tells the government that you can't establish, you can't favor, you can't fund. We, the government, aren't, unlike France, we're not in the religion, actually not, unlike other countries, we don't fund religion. And so that's where the separation between. Now, what about the Maryland case? That's, I think, fascinating. That's the case dealing with parents who brought a lawsuit because they wanted to opt their children out, to withdraw them on days. These are little kids, in which the teacher was going to teach a storybook that had gay and lesbian characters. And so in this area, the parents are saying, whoa, whoa, this is conflicting with my religious principles. I have a First Amendment right here. I'm paying taxes, and you're violating my religious liberty. There is a long history of cases that says, yes, but public education is important, and that oftentimes it might even trump a constitutional right. What's a really good example of that? Rambunctious kids who get up in class and make speeches, right? You tell the kid to sit down. The parents can't show up the next day and say, you violated my son's First Amendment rights. You're allowed to, the school can run itself. And I think Justice Kagan was saying, how do you expect schools to be in business if kids are running out all the time because their parents don't want them to hear something?
Yeah, this is the Mahmoud case, and it's very interesting as well. It's a parents' rights. It's a religious freedom case and a parents' rights case. They're sort of filtered through each other, where the Supreme Court said that if you substantially impair the right of a parent to direct the religious upbringing of their child, that's going to violate the free exercise rights of the parents. And in this case, the court, because that was the articulation of the right, the court ends up applying a very stringent test to evaluate it, and the state was not able to sustain its burden under this very stringent test. And so that's why the state ended up losing, the parents end up winning, and you can, excuse your kids. But that, from a doctrinal perspective, there are a lot of sort of nuances there that I won't get into because it'll take too much time and Thane will get mad.
Yeah,
but
true.
What's so interesting to me about that case is what it says about the success of anti-LGBT claims that come before the Supreme Court. What if they were not objecting to the storybooks that dealt with gay couples getting married or having a transgender child, and instead it was a storybook about an interracial couple getting married? The same kinds of questions arose several years ago in the 303 Creative case, where Justice Jackson was making the same point. That was for those of you who pay attention, you all pay attention to stuff. Really quickly, that was the
Colorado
website design.
The website design. Remember, when you were here back in other years, there was the Colorado cake maker and the Colorado web design. This is the web designer from Colorado.
And so in any event, what's the Supreme Court going to say if someone says that they have very deep, sincere religious objections to instruction that undermines what they're teaching their kids about race, or undermines what they're teaching their kids about gender relations? Is this court going to apply the same kind of freedom or grant the same kind of freedom to these religious parents as they do to the religious parents who raise objections regarding LGBTQ status? I don't know what's going to happen. We'll
I want to
see.
get to ghost guns. Before that, I just want to ask, how come no one's talking about Inherit the Wind? I mean, isn't this Inherit the Wind, the Scopes monkey trial? Right? I mean, didn't Spencer Tracy already do that? I thought he did that. I saw the movie. It's excellent, by the way. And I learned from movies that the school can teach creation. I mean, they can teach science, evolution. They can teach about Darwin. And the town doesn't get to decide that their understanding of the Old Testament governs the science in the classroom. All right.